prioritizing your mental health as an entrepreneur in 2023. Hey everyone, it's Angela Mishuli, your host of the Good Enough Mompreneur Podcast, where we talk about everything business and motherhood, minus the perfectionism. Welcome or welcome back. Thank you for joining me on this episode, which is going to be a very personal one. I just felt really compelled to put this episode together about one of the greatest lessons that's come out of my entrepreneurial journey in 2022. And I have no doubt that what I've learned can definitely help others who may be struggling with their own mental health issues. And so I wanted to talk about how you can prioritize your mental health in 2023 as a mompreneur, as an entrepreneur, or just as a parent or an employee or wherever you are in your life right now. So I want to dive into all of the topics that I have listed, but first it's really important to point out that I am not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I'm not offering medical advice, but I'm just offering a perspective on what personally helped me in my mental health challenges over the last few years as an entrepreneur. And if you feel like you are experiencing a mental health crisis, please seek the help of a mental health professional, because I am not a mental health professional. I have just, probably everybody on this planet, had my own mental health challenges. And I think my story can absolutely help anybody who's listening to this episode, because we all have good days and bad days. So with that being said, by the end of this episode, you're going to know a few things. You're going to know why mental health should be a top priority to every entrepreneur. And as a mompreneur, you definitely have more challenges, in my opinion. We all have our challenges. We have a lot more on our plate and a lot more things that can tax us mentally in dealing with our families and our spouses and running a business. So why is it that mental health should be a top priority for you as a mompreneur or an entrepreneur listening to this episode? Then I'm going to talk about some of the lies or the stories that you might be telling yourself as a person who's experienced trauma. And you're going to probably need to understand what is trauma. And for me, I really needed to learn what CPTSD was. What are the symptoms? What are some of the truths about dealing with mental health challenges? And then, of course, some resources for healing and feeling better and feeling happier and less stressed and full of anxiety and depression. So, all right. So let's start at the top. Why should you prioritize your mental health as an entrepreneur? There was a UC Berkeley study that was published a few years ago. I found a publication date in 2015. It looked like it had been updated, so I'm not quite sure about the date, but it was definitely this century, and I'm going to put some links to some articles who cited this study in the resource notes. So in this UC Berkeley study, they found that 72% of entrepreneurs struggle with mental health issues. So number one, if you are an entrepreneur thinking about being an entrepreneur, understand that there is a mental health price. or there can be if you don't anticipate it, or if you're in the middle of it and you're not really sure why you're feeling the way you're feeling. So, why should you care about the fact that 72% of entrepreneurs struggle with mental health issues? Well, number one is, and there's just no way around this, prioritizing your mental health is crucial to your business success. There's just no way around it. There are a lot of challenges as an entrepreneur. And the second point that I wanted to make is that who you are and where you are individually as a person directly impacts your business. Like what you're afraid of. How do you handle relationships with other people? How do you manage your time? What are your goals? Do you dream big or do you stay small? Those are all connected to your self-worth and your past experiences, and they will all creep up on you as an entrepreneur. And I've talked with entrepreneurs on this podcast and not on the podcast about how much becoming an entrepreneur is therapy. Because when you become an entrepreneur, you can no longer outrun any of your mental health challenges, past or new, because it just so quickly impacts your business. So there are a lot of burdens, as you can imagine, or maybe you're already in your business and you're experiencing it, doing everything on your own. And so many mental health challenges are connected with finances. So being financial literate can definitely be a way, and not taking too many financial risks can definitely be a way that you can help your mental health. And we'll talk a little bit later, but you can imagine all of the reasons why being an entrepreneur and shouldering a lot of responsibility can be so stressful. So in addition to that, you have to be very intentional with almost every aspect of your life as an entrepreneur. And that takes a lot of effort and consistency. And nobody can be consistent all of the time. It's part of the mental health. You have to give yourself a break sometimes. But not prioritizing that you need to do those things can lead to depression. It can lead to burnout, chronic anxiety, insomnia, and worse. We've heard some really terrible stories this year about people who just couldn't manage it all and didn't feel one way or another that they could reach out for any help. With that, I would just say, being an entrepreneur can feel very lonely too, especially if you are an online entrepreneur and you're kind of working and doing things by yourself and maybe have a remote team, or, you don't have a lot of personal connection with people on the business side of things. You might with clients or whatever. But I think anytime I mention how lonely being an entrepreneur can feel, whatever type of business that you have, I get a lot of nods. So it's definitely something like if you're new to being an entrepreneur, you might be already feeling that. So I think some of the important things to think about and keep in the back of your mind are, if you have that little voice that tells you that something is not right, definitely listen to it. And really ask yourself about what led you to want to start a business. Are you running from something? Is that this is something that I've seen that leads some people to become an entrepreneur, is that they just couldn't hack being an employee. They couldn't manage personal relationships. They couldn't deal with those really fine-tuned situations that are presented to you as an entrepreneur. And was there something that you feared as an employee that you needed, but you didn't feel you could ask for? Those are just a few of the questions that I think, really having a moment with yourself. Why did you want to become an entrepreneur? What was pushing you in that direction other than just this sense that you needed to start your own thing? If the fact that you couldn't manage your personal relationships, or you had a fear of asking for what you needed, that could definitely be a sign of some really deep-rooted trauma that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. So just ask yourself some of those questions. So if you're a person like myself, who really didn't see myself as having mental health challenges, or certainly not ones that looked like other people's, what are some of the stories that you might be telling yourself? And number one is that you're not enough. You aren't good enough. And I think women largely deal with this, but also people who have been through a lot of childhood trauma tend to feel that way. If they were abandoned or neglected or just didn't get their emotional needs met as a child, you can definitely tend to feel that way. And I think that that's directly related to the title of this podcast, and that for a very long time I didn't feel good enough, and I had to unpack why that was. And I think if you're feeling that like that on any level, it would definitely benefit you to unpack that. So, more stories that you may be telling yourself if you've had trauma in your life that is affecting your business and your life. So, one story that you could be telling yourself, like I did, was that your past situation, in my case it was my childhood, didn't affect you because of my achievements and my seemingly normal outward appearance and what other people thought of me. They was like, and I had achieved so much more than anybody had in my family. So that was a symbol to me, like I'd made it. Look what I did. So my childhood didn't affect me because, that I'd overcome it because I was able to make certain accomplishments in my life. And that definitely wasn't the case. You can tend to feel damaged. You can feel shame and fear about what others people would think about you if they knew about your past situation. Sometimes people feel that everyone's out to get them and somehow life is rigged against them and nothing ever works out for them. Sometimes you can lack boundaries. You'll take whatever comes your way because you really don't have a very, underneath it all, a high self-worth, and you don't have a lot of strict boundaries that you need to have just because of your past experiences. And you may really struggle with your identity. You may feel like good things won't last, and people don't want to get to know you. You kind of have this sense of like you're on the outside looking in and everybody's having a great time and nobody includes you, and you feel very different from everyone else around you. Some people who experience trauma can feel that love and happiness isn't real, and you can just, like, people who are happy and in love, it can just kind of make you cringe. Like that doesn't exist. Like, these are stories that you kind of have to tell yourself, especially if you experience childhood trauma like I did. These are stories that you have to tell yourself to cope and to get through experiences. And really it leads you to not be your authentic self. It's like you're having to pretend to be something different than everybody else, because really if you have childhood trauma, it can distort your sense of normalcy. Like, you don't know what that is. And you can tend to also over-explain yourself. So, and those are all just kind of, actually that's more of a symptom. Some of the stories you may be telling yourself as somebody who's dealing with mental health issues. And for me, that was definitely something that I felt, some of those things that really helped me kind of step back. And I probably should at this point just kind of interrupt this episode and just kind of give you a little bit of a story about me. Um, for me, I'm not here to kind of rehash what I went through. Um, to me, it just doesn't really matter. I'm so beyond that, and it's like just saying that you're a person who was affected by a traumatic situation, whatever it was. And for me, my entire childhood or my entire adulthood with my mother, who I love very dearly, was very traumatic. It was very difficult, and she had borderline personality disorder, which you cannot live with somebody who has that and not experience trauma. So I dealt with that my entire life and have spent the last more than a decade since she passed away kind of unpacking that. But I thought that because of all that I have achieved in my life and because I wasn't who she was, that obviously it didn't affect me. And that is definitely not the case. It definitely affected me. So, but I didn't know how. It's like probably like any other symptom, you don't know how other people feel. You don't know how other people feel happiness or sadness or have certain reactions to things. You don't know unless you seek out information, like what it all means. So for me, I had a very long interaction with somebody in my life who presented with very similar behavior as my mother, and wow, I had been separated from what that felt like for a decade. In my interactions with this person, who I've since had to distance myself from, have directly made me feel like that again. And so it led me down this path of trying to understand their behavior and kind of like my reaction. And my kind of reaction of feeling like a harmed child all over again. It was very difficult, but I'm actually very grateful for that situation, because if it hadn't been for that situation, I wouldn't have made all these revelations. So that's just, if you have a situation where you feel like somebody is just giving you a certain emotional or physical reaction, it's there for a reason. Your body and your mind are trying to tell you something, and I would definitely follow the crumbs to wherever that leads you and what other new understanding or new information that might help you understand your reaction. Because for me as an entrepreneur, just having emotional control and not letting others affect me is very important, and it has always been a goal of mine. So it kind of led me down this path of trying to understand how to control this other person's behavior and its impact on me, because you can't control other people, right? You can only control how you react to a situation. So it kind of led me down this path of trying to understand what was going on, not only with this person, but my reaction to it. So if you're somebody who has mental health challenges and, like myself, experience trauma, some of the symptoms can be you're a workaholic. You can be a perfectionist. You can, like, nothing is ever good enough. You can over-explain yourself. You might struggle to really know who you are. You might feel like a victim in almost every situation. And I think I mentioned this previously, but you can tend to feel very different from other people. And because of that, you can tend to isolate yourself, or you might isolate yourself just because other people are so triggering. And you may not even realize it. Like if you just can't deal with people, I mean, that can be a sign of trauma or mental health issues because, we might not like somebody, but constantly reacting to other people instead of responding and being able to manage your own reactions, that in itself, you can harness that. You can learn to control how you feel in a situation regardless of like what is happening. You can work on that, and that's definitely something you can have better control over. So, and you might struggle with personal relationships. After relationship after relationship after relationship isn't going well, it's not the other person. Not to say that other people are perfect, but if how you manage it and you're constantly feel like you're burning bridges and no longer talking to people, there can be a reason why, and it might start with you. So, learning about what situations trigger you, and I've had to learn more about this because it might not be very obvious to you. And my relationship with time is very much affected by trauma that I experienced. And one of the most surprising symptoms was this sense of being rushed. It can really just trigger this reaction. In me in the past, because I'm aware of it and I know that it's something that I need to work on, it no longer kind of controls me. So I think that at this point it's probably a good idea to kind of look at why you may be feeling this way. And it became evident to me in that I absolutely experienced a lot of trauma growing up. And so what is trauma? What is it defined as? And I found a definition that is pretty good. It was defined as a deeply distressing or disturbing experience, a personal trauma like a death of a child. So, I think we tend to aggrandize like what trauma has to be. We can have a traumatic experience with somebody we just meet randomly. It doesn't have to be like a battlefield situation or a car accident or some major event. It can just be losing somebody important to you. It can be moving. It can be, a series of things. So make sure that if you're feeling some of these symptoms that you are not belittling your own experience and like telling yourself one of those stories and that, oh, this situation didn't affect you. It very well may be affecting you and you don't realize it. So for me, understanding what complex post-traumatic stress disorder is and something that I definitely experienced and I'm definitely focused on healing from, it is a disorder that can result from severe, chronic, or extremely threatening trauma. Often the trauma is also interpersonal, happens early in life, lasts for a long time, involves a mix of trauma types, and or is followed by one or more unrelated traumas. So CPTSD, I had no idea, I'm a military spouse. I always associated PTSD with somebody who had severely traumatic experiences, like maybe on a battlefield or, had the horrific experience of being in a car accident. Maybe like all of the passengers didn't survive, or maybe people in another car didn't survive or something, just these huge, horrible experiences. I never for an instant thought that just my life, which, it was not horrible every day. I never dreamed that it could be the source of CPTSD, which now learning more about it, it absolutely was. So just figuring that out has been a tremendous help. So I talked about some of the stories or lies that you might tell yourself as a survivor of CPTSD or trauma or mental health challenges. So I want to talk about some of the truths. And some of those truths are that, one, no one else is going to save you. You just really have to take the responsibility as an adult for your own mental health. Like, if you're thinking that the perfect situation is someday going to present itself so you no longer have the reactions that you do, that is just not true. Like, what you need to do is really focus on your own reactions and your responses. I encourage you to learn how to respond to a situation, not react. That is what's going to really give you power in your own life and just really help you be the captain of your own ship. Another truth is you have to make it a priority. It's the most important thing to yourself individually, which you should put first before your business. But it's directly going to impact your business if you don't make it a priority. And then also another truth is you can heal. But more importantly, your situation or your past is not who you are. It's not your identity. And then you cannot change the past, but you can change the unhealthy habits you learn to cope and survive to better thrive as an adult and an entrepreneur. So when you're telling yourself all of the stories that I mentioned earlier, know that you can't change that terrible experience, but you can do things to kind of help you thrive as an adult and an entrepreneur. Those are things you have control of now. So those are the topics that I really wanted to cover and talk about mental health as an entrepreneur. But I also absolutely want to include some of the amazing resources out there. We live at such an amazing time where we can turn on the television and have access to information that can be incredibly healing. Like in the past, you might have had to gone to 11 therapists or, who knows, and spend thousands of dollars and waste all of this time trying to find out the solution to your mental health challenges. And one of my most favorite resources is the Crappy Childhood Fairy. She's amazing. And she is absolutely a CPTSD survivor. And she talks about some really amazing new developments in treatment for people with CPTSD. And that traditional therapy may actually re-injure people in rehashing and talking about, traumatic events in your life. So she has a very amazing resources, free resources. She offers coaching and does free Zoom calls twice a month, something like that, to help people shift their mindset, incorporate daily practices, and offers like journaling prompts that can be incredibly healing, as well as provide a really supportive community of other people who may have gone through similar situations that you have. So one of my first resources that I would like to suggest is the Crappy Childhood Fairy. She's amazing. And then some of the other resources that have been helpful to me is, so the Crappy Childhood Fairy, she has, and I'll link all of this in the show notes, she has a website and she also has a popular YouTube channel. So Patrick Tian, LICSW, he's a licensed therapist. He has some really amazing resources, free and otherwise, on his podcast, and he has a YouTube channel, and he also has a website. I'll link that below. Dr. Romani, many people have gotten to know her, especially since the pandemic. She's been on a number of podcasts. She seems to be like one of the definitive authorities on narcissism, which is why I stumbled upon her YouTube channel, because dealing with someone who I suspect is a narcissist and trying to unpack how that impacted me, she just has really amazing mental health resources, and she is a doctor and a mental health professional who has great resources. So lastly, I wanted to mention Lori Gottlieb, who is also a therapist, and I want to make sure that I am getting this information correct, but she's also an author, and she wrote the New York Times bestseller, Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. And she has incredible resources on her website, and then she also she has her own podcast called Dear Therapist. So another great resource there. And then I am just going to list and give you links to some of the podcasts that I've listened to that also have talked about this topic and have had great episodes or have recurring episodes on mental health issues. And as an entrepreneur, I feel like I'm constantly trying to be on top of like mental health challenges and issues, and if I can head them off. So some of those podcasts are Dear Gabby, Mel Robbins, and Amy Porterfield's podcast, Online Marketing Made Easy. And so, yeah, I just wanted to end this year with just kind of bringing up this topic that has been, I'm so glad that with the pandemic, it has gotten new attention, how much we need to pay attention to our mental health. But my final thoughts are that your trauma can become your superpower. It can give you a unique perspective, and usually a more intuitive perspective on the world. You can see light in the dark of your experiences that you've had and really help change somebody else's life just by overcoming them. So don't ever forget that. If there is any takeaway message from this episode, it would be that you're just not your trauma that you experienced. You can't erase it, but you can change how you deal with it. So with that, I hope that this podcast episode was helpful for you. If you're identifying with any of these issues, definitely seek resources and seek the help of a mental health professional if you think that you need one. So this is my last podcast episode of 2022. I am incredibly grateful for every guest, for every supporter, for every listener. Thank you so much. It's been an amazing journey this year. I hope that you will continue the journey with me next year. Have some projects and things that I can't wait to share with you, and I think 2023 is going to be amazing. I learned so much in 2022, much of which I never even imagined, and accomplished more than I ever thought was imaginable. This time last year, I didn't even have a podcast. It was, nobody's going to say yes. Nobody's going to want to talk to me. Nobody's going to want to listen. And y'all proved me wrong. So I'm grateful for that. So, 2022 was a great year. So I look forward to more important conversations in 2023. If I can just give you a quick reminder to please leave a review for the show, an honest review. If this show impacts you, if you can relate to it. I'd love to hear about it in a review. You can go to Apple Podcasts, scroll to the bottom and leave a star review. You can leave a written review. If you would like to reach out to me on Instagram, you can do that at angela.masciulli, Masciulli. I'll leave links in the show notes. Then you can also reach out to me via DM, or if you want to tag me in a post or whatever, if this show impacted you. I hope you have an amazing 2023. Please also remember to subscribe to the show so you don't miss an episode. Share it with a friend or somebody in your family. And this is Angela with the Good Enough Mompreneur Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great 2023. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.